You're going to judge me, but it's fine. I'm used to that.
Always. Welcome to 5-3 Podcast. I'm Doria, joined by my former coworker turned co-host, Brittany.
Hi.
Hey, Brittany. How are you doing?
I'm good. We had some weird weather today. It was 77 and sunny. Now potential golf ball sized hail and maybe a tornado. I don't know. We'll see. How are you?
I don't know how I am, honestly. I'm all over the place. There's like 17 different things going on at once. But going back to your weather, in the Pacific Northwest, you guys are known for your temperate weather. So this is very atypical for you all, right?
This is not common. Yesterday was the hottest day. It was like a record for the hottest day this early in the year. Something that was even warmer today, which is absolutely crazy to me. But at one point I went outside, walked the dogs, hung out for a while. It was so nice, so fantastic. And now I'm staring out of my window and it's gloomy. It's a little windy too. And the wind is what's bringing in a lot of that not so nice weather. So we'll see what happens.
Well, I hope it stays temperate. I hope it was just a little weather snafu. We'll have to see if those meteorologists were actually accurate.
You know how I feel about meteorologists.
I know.
Oh, wow. It is really picking up out there.
Huh.
We'll see. I will stay safe. I
hope.
hope.
See if you get swept away during this episode.
I will report back from Oz, maybe find Ariana Grande. I don't know.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, we'll have a part 2 and you'll be someplace else. Cool. Well, I am excited because this episode, you and I are going to talk about the documentary about Karen Read called A Body in the Snow, The Trial of Karen Read, which is apparently on Max, Hulu. I read it was on Netflix, but I didn't see it on Netflix.
Interesting.
But Brittany and I watched it in its entirety, both of us separately. We did not discuss all the details about it so we could do it here live, but I'm excited. However, before we get started, there was an update today. So today being, what is it, the 26th? Say the 26th? Okay.
The trial starts next month, right?
April 1st. So the retrial starts April 1st, but there was an announcement made today, which hit our news circuits, that an alternate juror from the original trial joined her legal team. So Karen Read's legal team officially and was named. Yes. So they had Esquire at the end of their name. So I'm assuming, obviously, they have a legal background, right? But they were, yep. They were an alternate. They did not actually participate as a juror, but they were still privy to a bunch of stuff.
Interesting.
Right. So people are assuming that their contribution will really be helping them appeal to the next jury in ways they didn't in the last, which is crazy.
How wild! Like insider information.
I know. Newsflash up here. Is that nuts?
I feel like for as many conspiracy theories are on one side, there are so many other things that just happen to work out so well for this side of things.
100%.
Yeah.
So yes, a little hot news for today. By the time this goes up next week, I mean people probably already know. But sharing with you, it's crazy. The other thing I wanted to ask you about. So before we get into kind of like the blow by blows of the documentary, which details out from when they go out that night in the bar all the way through the end of the trial, which is declared a mistrial. I want to ask you, what did you think about their inclusion of the ex-girlfriend as someone being interviewed in that? Because I have thoughts and opinions about this.
Yeah, that was interesting. But I feel... I don't know. I feel bad judging. But
just your authentic opinions and thoughts. That's what this is all about.
Have you... Oh, this is going to sound so bad. But have you heard the term hover near fame?
No,
so she wants to hover near the spotlight. It's pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
She just seems like very much that. She wanted to be in the spotlight. She magically came out of nowhere and had all of these thoughts, all of these opinions, all of these feelings. I couldn't figure out how close. She made it seem like they were still relatively close at one point, but also not.
Right.
I couldn't get a read on it.
She came off to me, at least, as a former lover, girlfriend, whatever she was to him, who was very much taking advantage, and maybe I'm wrong, of the opportunity to be highlighted as having this relationship or connection. Maybe they still were close, and maybe that's part of why Karen Read was the way she was with him. But I did not need to
Yeah.
hear her opinions at all. Like, I could have done without every segment with her in it simply because she wasn't a part of the actual story or trial. So
Yep.
why
Again,
was she
hovered near
being
fame.
interviewed? Right.
She wanted to be part of it, but it also, I feel like this is not entirely uncommon because did
Mhm.
you watch the Gabby Petito documentary
Yes.
on
I was gonna
Netflix?
say you and I should definitely do one
Hmm.
on that at some point. Yeah.
So how they had the former roommate,
Yep.
the one that he was in love with me first. He
Yeah.
loved me. Like they
Yep.
want
Yep.
that validation. I don't know
Yep.
if it's they want credibility, they want to be involved, they want to be
Mm.
in the spotlight, they want to feel
Mhm.
important to something.
Feel like a part of it.
I Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's exactly what it is where they want a chance to be on TV,
Yeah.
which is incredibly unfortunate, but it's also not about you. It's about this person
Right.
whose life was lost, right?
Absolutely. It's about the victim. Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally. And unless you were still involved and we just didn't know it or don't know it
Mm-mm.
yet, everybody else who was interviewed was in some way, shape, or form directly connected, whether they were a
Yeah.
part of the trial or related to one of them. She
Yeah.
is neither a relation nor a participant in the trial.
Nope.
So I feel like she was
But
added for drama exclusively.
oh, 100%.
Yeah.
But I will also say,
Yeah.
hot take, I don't think very many people in this entire thing were relatively likable to begin with.
Mhm. Yes, agreed. So I'm a Massachusetts native, as I've mentioned before, but I'm a Massachusetts native. This obviously took place up here, but it took place in a
Mhm.
different part of Massachusetts than where I'm from or where I currently reside. However, we are definitely known for being pretty forthcoming and blunt and not, I wouldn't say we're necessarily always in your face, but like what you
Yeah.
see is what you get. There's
Yeah, and
not a
that's
lot of
fine.
fluff. But I feel like for many reasons, a lot of the people that maybe it was the way they were being interviewed, maybe it's the way they're being edited. I don't know. I
Yeah.
don't actually understand the purpose of that documentary. Like who asked for it
Yeah.
first? Was it her camp actually pitching it? Did they come to her and say, "Hey, here's an opportunity to get your side out"? The fact that we're actually allowing documentaries like that to
Mhm.
occur when there is going to be another trial is an interesting fact to me. I don't know. I have a lot of feelings about it,
But
but I'm not sure I have an opinion necessarily.
yeah, they didn't know there was going to be a second trial, right? Like they went into
Right.
this during the time of the first trial, which
Yeah.
for some reason I thought this was a retro where they were looking back and explaining things. I didn't realize this was a play by play as it kind of
Yep.
unfolds.
Yep.
And that threw me for a loop. That's not entirely unheard of,
Yeah.
but some of these
Yeah.
people, and I feel bad. And it's not even their, like the way they talk or just the
Mhm.
way that they're very drunk. Like I think that's
Sure.
fine. I've been to Boston a couple times. You know my stories. We'll talk
Yes,
about
I
them one
do.
day. But I think what throws me off is just
Mm.
the way things came off. I
Yeah.
think one of the first things that stood out to me
Mhm.
was when they were in that SUV going to court, right? They were on their way to the
Yes.
courthouse and she's on her phone. She's like, "Oh my God, Al reached out. They want to do a story on me. Should I do it?" And the lawyer's like, "Yes, you should do it." And
Yeah.
I was blown away. I'm like, this is your priority right now.
Yeah.
And even when she got
I
arrested, I'm like, "Ma'am,
so
what?"
I would love to know whether or not they had any sort of control over editing at all. Like if they had any final say on certain things, if there were any guardrails around what they could or could not
Yeah.
include or whatever. I don't know. I have thoughts about this. I don't know if this is more harmful or helpful to her in particular, which is
Yeah.
kind of what was on my mind while watching it. Like, is this going to actually be more polarizing? Are the people who are for her going to be more gassed up to support her, and the people who are against her going to feel, you know, really off put by her? I don't know. I don't know. So,
Uh, I
yeah.
got thoughts.
Yes, let's dig into it. Okay, so to start, I wanted to give just a tiny little bit of background on both of them, and I am not an expert on this case. I actually knew when all this first happened. Obviously, up here there was some, chatter about it. When the case kicked off, it reignited awareness about this case, and so I worked out of Boston, and everybody at work, when it started to kick back up, was talking about it. It was a constant topic of conversation, actually. And then it kind of died back down, right? As it does.
Yeah.
But I didn't know too much about her background or his background, and I'm not someone who like really gets too invested in crime like this most of the time because honestly, I I have other things going on. So Karen Reed was from Mansfield, Massachusetts. I believe she still lived in Mansfield,
Mhm.
Massachusetts up until I think she sold her house actually last year. I read that might not be true, but that's what I read. She owned her own home. She was very educated. She had a bachelor's and a master's in finance from Bentley University. And she had a job as a financial analyst and adjunct professor at Bentley University. So I felt like in some podcasts, I had listened to two about her. I didn't feel like they really highlighted much about them and the fact that these were actually educated individuals who had, obviously we knew he had a job, but we didn't know much about her. I felt like they kind of portrayed her in a certain light and realistically, like, one thing I will say about up here, work hard, play hard is absolutely how some people live their lives. Like some people will pull a 60 to 80 hour week and then go and live their best lives after. You hit a certain age and you kind of stop for the most part, but it's not unheard of to have someone who's incredibly educated, has a good job, also maybe participating in some of the stuff that she was doing. Like, again, there was excessive drinking and things like that. Now, John was originally from Braintree, moved to Canton, I don't know when, went to Northeastern, which we all know is a good school, and obviously became a part of the Boston PD. So for those who don't know, Mansfield, Canton, they're not in Boston. They're on the outskirts of greater Boston, but they're not in Boston. They're a decent drive away. So when people say like this happened in Boston, it actually didn't. I think
Fair.
it's kind of like, yeah, if you're from Texas, you're from like Houston, Dallas, Austin, right? If you're from Massachusetts, everybody thinks you're from Boston. Everybody thinks everything happens in Boston. It's not in
Yep.
Boston. And that's why if you see like they go to the district court in Norfolk County, not in Boston. So that's why they're not in Boston when they go to court. So just a little background there. Also, you'll notice the accents. That's the accent you're hearing. And that's the accent you're hearing from other people that they're spending time with too, that Canton area accent. So, all right, diving into their relationship a little bit. What was your read on their relationship as a whole, which I think they were only together for 2 years, right? In total?
Yeah, 2 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was your read
That's a
on their
pretty long time,
relationship?
especially okay, so to you, no, but to me, as I've gotten older, I'm like, wow, 2 years with someone, that's a lot of time. I feel like as you get older, relationships, the amount of time just feels like so much more because they're in their 40s. 2 years feels like five, realistically. And I think that is something that's been very top of mind for me lately. I'm like, huh, interesting. Things just move at a different pace, I feel like, when you're older.
Mhm.
I think she clearly did not want kids. That
No.
came across very clearly
Not of
when
her
she was
own, for
talking
sure.
about how. No, very much what she
Yeah.
was talking about. She never saw herself white picket fence with kids or just
Yeah.
like all of that. Very much no, which I think comes up again when she's talking to Officer Higgins at
Mhm.
some point, and she talks about how she doesn't have kids. So I think that was a very big consideration that she
Mhm.
needed to be very transparent about up front.
Mhm.
And that was a miss. But then when I go over the text messages between the two of them and her first response when she thinks he's somewhere else is to call him and cuss him out.
Yeah.
It just feels like it was in a rough place and it was very emotional. But I also have been in
Yes.
relationships with people where when they're out drinking, they're
Mhm.
highly emotional. It's like a switch
Right.
flips in them, very aggressive. And I feel very much like that.
Mhm.
The way she handles a lot of that, because you really only see her side of things, right? His stuff is very much
Right.
like, stop calling me, leave me alone. She's continuing to go on a badger
Mhm.
him. Very much reminds me of people I've dated where they can be
Mhm.
totally fine around people, but once they
Mhm.
start drinking excessively, they are not nice. They are
Mhm.
very aggressive and they are not in a good place. And I feel like that was kind of that dynamic there, to be honest.
Yeah. So I definitely think they had a volatile relationship. I think that was
Yeah.
very obvious, at least the way, and again, this was all portrayed in the documentary that is heavily edited. We're seeing like,
Yeah.
what is it, like 5-6 hours worth of footage from months and months and months. But
Yeah.
I do feel like it was very obvious there was volatility there. I think it's
Yeah.
obvious that there was jealousy there. And I personally think that and maybe it's my bias or my experience, someone who tends to be flirting with the idea of cheating or actually cheating tends to accuse their partner of cheating because it's weighing on them. Do I also think that maybe he was kind of stoking that flame at times? Maybe like that whole Aruba situation where he's talking to, I think it was the
Mhm.
younger sister of his sister's friend or whatever it was. There was like a connection there. If you know your partner is sensitive about things or you're not in a good place, there are ways that you can get around that, right? Like bring them
Yeah.
along, introduce them, like
He was
I don't
walking
know.
down the hall.
Was he? They were
He
in
was
the
walking
lobby.
down he was walking through,
Yeah.
and the parent wasn't with him at the time, and he saw her and he gave her a
Yeah.
hug, and then she flipped out. Like,
Whose story was that, though? I can't even remember who told that story. That was a family member, right? Who told that story?
that
Or
was
was
the
it? It
girl
was the
who he
girl.
hugged. The girl who
Yeah.
he hugged.
So I feel like there's his story, her story, and the truth. It does
Yeah.
seem. Why would you stay with someone who doesn't trust you if you're not giving them a reason to? I don't understand that. Like, I can't understand the psychology behind that. I think they were probably both unhealthy for each other. That was
Oh
my
yeah, 100%.
conclusion. Yeah, I don't think either one, and again, we're looking at it from the outside. I don't think either one was necessarily good for the other, and I don't think either one was necessarily completely innocent in the way that they were kind of maybe stoking each other's insecurities. But I think we can all agree there was volatility. There was definitely heavy alcohol consumption, which is not entirely, again, uncommon in my experience. So I dated 2 firefighters, and drinking is definitely a part of how a lot of people do let their hair down and decompress. And like, I can tell you, I witnessed the most excessive drinking around like celebrations. Someone, got their cert, you celebrate. There's a funeral, there's excess drinking. I'm shocked that no one is talking about the fact that not only were they driving drunk, but with an open container in the car, which is illegal up here. You can't even buy a bottle of wine at a restaurant and recork it yourself and put it in your car. Like, they have to cork it at the restaurant. And actually, most of us are told, like, put it in your trunk so that there's no way, if you get pulled over, that there's any suspicion you've been drinking it. So the fact that these are obviously watering holes that they're going to, visited 2 bars. I think she was accused of drinking the equivalent of 9 servings. They said 9 drinks, but she was like, no, it was like X servings,
6,
right?
Yeah.
6 drinks, but like 9 ounces essentially of alcohol, or 9 servings of alcohol, to the point where like they must have frequented it enough, which makes sense, that they took one of the glasses with them. What was it, like a vodka seltzer, into the car and then drove that way.
Yeah.
Not okay. Like, that's really not okay. Not only is it illegal up here, but like, I think it highlights a problem. There is a little bit of wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Like, if you get pulled over and you serve,
which they talked about in the documentary, right?
For sure. But I'm surprised that there isn't more, I don't know, just concern over the fact that it's probably not isolated to just them. It's probably more of a systemic problem, which we know it is. But I was kind of shocked that it was even brought up at all, because it really highlights to me a bigger problem. I don't know. Anyway, so they go to the bar, right? And they go to, what is it, CF McCarthy's, and was it Waterfall Bar and Grill? And they move from one to the other. Again, they said that she had 9 drinks. She maps it all out, does the math, and she's like, it's actually 6, but it sounds like they were saying 9 servings because some of them had shots in them and whatnot. They drive away intoxicated with an open container in the car, and then they go to Brian Albert's house. Now, they had met, it was like Brian Albert, his wife, 2 other people in the family of the same generation. And was it Brian Higgins was also there?
Yeah.
Okay.
Higgins was there.
Okay. And then they all decide, like, let's take this party on the road and go to the Alberts. And this is where it all kind of gets weird, right? Like, to me, obviously they're going to continue drinking, most likely, right? I don't know why they left at that point, though. That was interesting. I think it was like, was it midnight that they left, or was it 11? I don't think that was last call. No one mentioned that it was that last call. And it looked like there were still people in the surveillance at the bar. So I don't know what the purpose was in going to the Alberts. But
I mean, move the party to someone's house, right? If you're going to be out all night and you're going to keep drinking, maybe they were still slightly mindful of the fact if they kept going there, they were, one, spending more money, but also they could just go have everyone hang out at the house and party there. Plus, we don't know what they were going to the house for. We can assume they were going to keep drinking. We have no idea what was planning to go down at that house, right? Because other people showed up and attended also.
Yeah. It's such an interesting situation. Also, what I think I have not seen discussed is that the Alberts lived in a very stereotypical suburban neighborhood. Like, if you look at their homes in that area, if you look at the size of the plots, for example, if you look at how far they are from the road, when a lot of people portray this, they make it sound like it's in Boston, like in a neighborhood in Boston. It's not, right? First of all, it's not even in Boston. But there's a decent amount of space from the house to the road. And there's a
Yeah.
decent amount of space between the houses, which again, you see in more suburban neighborhoods because we have specific guardrails around how close you can build homes. So, what's interesting to me is if you see where his body was found, it
Yeah.
was found by the flagpole, which I think they said was it like 8 feet from the edge of the curb?
Maybe that I don't remember.
It was a decent distance. It was not like, again, the way that I've heard it portrayed, it was like, oh, house, curb, like really, really close, short distance, body found there. Also, people seem to, again, they talk about blizzards, right? But they make it sound like there were like 5, 6 foot drifts of snow or snowbanks. There wasn't. It wasn't actually that tall. Like for a New England blizzard, you could see the road from the house for sure.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to me. Again, like there's a body in your front yard and no one sees it. That's interesting. Like Karen pulls up to your house, you have a dog, the dog didn't bark, signaling that someone was out there. And like
Yeah.
you didn't watch for that person to come in. There's just so many things like that where I'm
Yeah.
like, what's the real story here? And she says, it sounds like they were probably like bickering in the car, right? And then he goes
Yeah.
in, she gets angry, and then she messages him. He doesn't come out, message him again, and then she just takes off, is her story, right?
Yeah. So she claims.
So she claims. But what, I mean, okay.
She claims she waited outside for 2 minutes.
Before she
2 to
messaged
3
the
minutes
first
before.
time.
Before
Because she
wait.
messaged twice, I think. When she was standing out there in the car, I think
Oh
she said
yeah,
she
the calls were
messaged
going
him.
through. Yeah.
Yeah, like she messaged him. She's like, are we going in? Because she wanted, according to her, she wanted him to double check that it was still okay for them to go inside.
Yeah.
Because she didn't know the Alberts the way that he did. They were a more
Yeah.
recent connection.
But what's really weird to me though
Mhm.
is, and where it gets kind of messy, is
Mhm.
Jen. What's her name? Jennifer?
Brian Alberts is the owner. I don't remember his wife's name. I'm so bad.
So it's not his wife.
Okay, so it's
it's the people that they
the
know
person
really
that's
well. It's
related. Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah. But who was harassed? The one that was with her when she went back to look for the body. That's Jennifer.
Yes, Jennifer McCabe.
McCabe. There we go. Yeah.
Yeah.
McCabe.
Okay, we'll get to her and what she did in a second too. But what were you going to say?
The timelines are weird to me because she
Yeah.
claims that she saw them pull up
Mhm.
through a window and she sent him text messages
Yep.
that she claims went through. But Karen says she saw him go inside, and when she was calling him, magically none of those calls actually went through.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of like, what does the cell data say?
Right.
Did these messages actually go through? What went
Mhm.
on? Yeah, that's what I want to know. And they didn't cover that, was what shows on his cell phone, right? Like, what are those
Right.
records? Because she's also saying she called him, which she did call him multiple times.
Yeah.
Back to back. So the argument that they were looking for his phone
Mhm.
also makes complete sense. Did he lose his phone in the house while he was still there? And it wasn't even anything malicious. Like, these conflicting storylines.
Yeah.
They throw me off.
What's interesting to me, so Karen Reed's story is that she just leaves because she's so infuriated and she's mad. And then she proceeds to call him 53 or 54 times, which tells me a couple things, most likely, right? In my non-expert opinion. One, she's clearly inebriated, right? That is manic behavior. Two, I think there's a lot of volatility there, and I think it comes out in this moment where she is desperately assuming that she did actually leave him there, trying to connect with him, and she's not thinking clearly because she is inebriated, and she's just rapid calling because she didn't have that far to go to get to his house where she goes and she eventually passes out on the couch after making 53 or 54 calls. That's a lot of calls. Like,
well, she thought he was cheating on her.
100%. Yeah. And some of the, they played some of the messages.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Well, she called out that she thought he was sleeping around with somebody in that neighborhood because he had ex-girlfriends in the area.
Yes.
And to your point, like, I think it was the insecurity and jealousy that was triggering her, but also
for sure,
very, very clearly inebriated.
Yeah. Yeah. And clearly, I mean, you know, when you've got a concentration of people that, one, are all friends, two, are all dating each other, it gets messy quickly. And I think that's part of what we're seeing is that dynamic of not enough degrees of separation. Everybody's connected. They're either related, they're friends, they're on the force together, or they've dated in a very small area. So she does her 53 or 54 calls, then supposedly passes out on the couch. and then wakes up. I think she said she passed out around, was it like 1 something or close to 2? And then she wakes back up somewhere between 4 and 5, I think is what she said.
It's around like 4:30.
Yeah. And so he's unaccounted for during all that time. But according to the Albert family, the owners of the home, the homeowners, they went to bed, did they say by like 2 something?
Yeah,
right?
that sounds about right.
Okay. And then the wife, she's the one who said she was in bed and searching. Was it like a competitive soccer team for her
So that's not his
daughter?
wife, who you're thinking.
Okay.
So that is Jennifer, and she's not his wife.
McCabe.
That's her
Okay.
cousin. Yeah. So Jennifer McCabe is cousins with the Alberts.
Gotcha. Okay. So she's the one who goes home, searches before she goes to bed, supposedly. Yes. But what we know, and this is something I wanted to talk to you about. So the data that they pulled from the Google, it looks like it's the Google database that timestamps the transactions where she searches Haas, like time
how
to die.
How long die in cold.
Yeah. So how long to die in the cold, right? Yeah. What their experts, I don't know what expertise they had, but what they're claiming is that she had a tab open and she had been searching something. It suspended it, but applied a timestamp. And when she reused it, when they found him and the first responders are there, it applied that timestamp to it and made it look like she had done it at 2 something, when it actually had been closer to the other 2 searches, which were at 6. What I don't understand is how their database actually does tag things in terms of timestamping, because anyone who's worked around a database knows like every transaction gets tagged, right?
Yeah.
It was also flagged as deleted. I would be very curious to know whether or not they have the ability to query that database and see when it was deleted. Because to me, that's actually just as interesting as when that transaction actually went through, when that query was made. So I feel like there were a lot of like gaps where it's like, did no one understand this enough to actually get the right people to come in and speak to it? Mm-hmm. Can they not subpoena someone at Google to be like, hey, how does this work? Also, when you work on anything mobile, you know that the device, the OS, and the browser can all make a difference, which was part of their argument.
Yeah.
But there's something to that. Like, to me, there's something very definitive about getting that information. Did she actually search for it at 2 and then again later on? Mm-hmm. Or did she not? I don't know, because I don't know enough about the database for Google's search engine. If anybody does, comment, message. I actually know a couple former Googlers, but they probably wouldn't know. It's just, it was very interesting to me because she searched it 3 different times. She also she misspelled it 3 times. She had typos in all 3 searches, but the other 2 were during that period where Karen Reed is running around clearly like distraught while the first responders are there. It's caught on the cam. But did she do that to cover up the fact she had already searched it earlier?
Yeah.
Or why would she search it 3 times? Because Google's good at approximating, what for typos.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My bigger question, because there's subpoenaing a company is incredibly difficult. Like, it's very specific and very nuanced with the amount of information and the detail of information you have to have to be able to actually subpoena it. And if you just have a standard Google tab open with no personal information associated with that, it's not as simple as you would think to just subpoena Google and say, can you tell me more about this, even with the device ID, right?
I bet they were logged in, though. I bet that they are logged into their Google accounts. Let's say they're not, though, for argument's sake. Or wait, it was on Safari, wasn't it? It was Safari with Google.
My favorite.
Okay, so they're not using Chrome, which means they're not logged in to the Chrome browser itself, but they could be logged into their Google account. Anyway, continue.
I'm never logged into my Google account.
I always
on my phone. Like, see, but you have to think, these are standard boring people. If anything, they probably use a mail app. They're just they are. Like,
I mean, she's using Safari, so
hey, I love Safari.
I know you
I
do
about this.
You and 40-somethings in Canton are using Safari. Okay, continue.
Wow. Okay. Yes. Wow. What stood out to me is, if you think about it, and I'm going to grab my phone. Just, you can mute me if you need to. I know you don't love my sounds. But when I open Safari, and I go to, and I have Google open as it is. Oh, I actually am logged into Google. See, I'm a different person these days. Like, if I type in my search, my bar is still here. And
Right.
when I close this
Yeah.
and I open Safari again, that tab is still there. So tell me, why am I Googling how long to die in cold? And let me tell you,
Yeah.
I am the equivalent of like an 80-year-old woman when it comes to certain things with technology.
Sure.
To open a new tab, I have to tap another little window. Do you think
Yeah.
I'm going to tap another little window? Most people are going to see the Google bars open and just change what's already there,
Sure.
right? Like,
Right.
so that to me is more of a, okay, well, why did you open a new tab? Because part of the other reasoning was it showed she opened a new tab to do this, which I don't fully believe. I do think
Yeah.
the one thing that kind of works in her favor is she made the exact same typo between those two searches.
I thought there was a difference. I thought it was
So there was eventually
cost long to die, and then there was the next one was slightly different.
So
she did 3 total.
So that to me is, if you think about the type of typos you can make, granted,
Mhm.
I make the exact same typos every
Mhm.
single time. Part of it has to do with the fact that I typically have longer nails. So my W's are constantly S's all of the time. So I get that. But to do that twice, but then to delete it and then redo it, I don't think she would be that technical.
Yeah. I also have to say, so data doesn't lie, but the way you query can
100%.
absolutely manipulate the data. And so we're looking at a table, for folks that aren't familiar, we're looking at a table of results from a query they did against that transaction, right?
Yeah.
But what we don't know is how they actually pulled that data. And there's so many different ways you can do it. So again, getting into the nitty-gritty technical side of it, I'm fascinated by that. The other thing is, if you've already searched it, right? Why would you search it a second time? Because your results are going to be right there. So why would you search it again? Why would you search it more than once at all if you supposedly only did it at 6 a.m.? Why'd you do it 3 times at 6 a.m.? Also, I have to say, to me, it's a little interesting that they were just like, no, I just didn't delete it. I didn't delete that. Like, it's so easy to delete your browsing history. People think that data goes away the second you delete something. It gets basically the equivalent at most archived. Unless you GDPR, CCPA, forget, request your data. It lives there forever. But people wouldn't know that necessarily.
Things also live on your devices. You can clear your browser history constantly. Did you also know, and I don't think a lot of people realize this, when you go to websites, a lot of images will auto-store to your computer in random places.
Yeah.
And it is terrifying to see what is stored on your laptop sometimes, just because you're like, why is this random picture of this person on my computer?
Right.
And part of that is like your cache. It wants to help websites load faster.
100%.
But these things also secretly live in there, and it is terrifying. So even if you think it's gone, spoiler alert, it is not gone.
It leaves a footprint. Also, for anyone who has worked in tech, who has ever supported software on a mobile device, you know that there's an element of your phone pushes data, right? Like, it's not constantly flowing. There's like a push, like an active push. If she searched it once and didn't get the results, could she have then searched it again? Like, let's say for some reason her connection was bad or it didn't push, whatever it was. Could she have then hit submit again? Sure. Why would she have done it 3 times, and why would there have been another typo? Because you're not going to keep retyping it in.
Yeah.
You're just going to hit submit.
I'm testing something, and I don't know if I can actually do this, but I opened a tab.
Okay.
And I'm trying to think about if I type in a search, and I've had it on
Please
this
don't
Google
type
page
that
for a
in,
while.
though.
I'm going to type in Haas Long Die and Cold. Like, I want to see what answers I get. Maybe it'll explain why she had to search it again. But as I think about it, my phone's not tracking keystrokes, right? It's tracking what the actual send is. So if I I have a tab open, and I type something in, long to die. Wow, how long to die in sepsis is like my first option. That's weird.
Okay, now I got it. So I don't. All right, let's see if we get different results because we're in different areas. That's actually part of it too. People don't realize your search results are heavily influenced by your browsing, your location, all of that. So let's try.
But if you think about it from even a technical standpoint, if I type this in and I don't hit send and I just have this open, my phone is going to show that I opened a tab at a specific time. And if I hit search, it's going to show the action of it running at a different time. So in theory, wow.
So Chrome automatically adjusted it. Like, it wouldn't even allow me to search Haas long to die in cold. It changed it to how automatically. And
interesting.
It's
You're
the
in
typical
Safari?
stuff you'd see. No, I'm in Chrome. I don't use Safari.
Oh.
I don't understand why she would search it multiple times, even if she did them all in the morning. That to me never made sense. I feel like we're like really hung up on this detail, but it's because of the technical side of it. Like there is something to be found here if they get the right person in to query the database.
But my follow-up question,
Mm-hmm.
so my first things that pop up are like main crisis line, how long does it take to die from hypothermia?
Mm-hmm.
These are very specific. There's no
Yeah.
explicit number. Like typically Google will give you an answer on the top like it typically does. Like it'll AI
So it does
something
for
you
me.
these days.
So I
in
get that.
Safari, it
Yeah.
doesn't. And
Okay.
so I have nothing
let me
here.
check.
And I can't
Let me
imagine that it has that
Which I
much.
never use.
And this is back in what, 2000?
I thought it was 2022. No? 2020? Now I
It was
don't even know.
2020. Yeah, and I think the trial was maybe. No, it had to be 2022. The world was locked down in 2020.
Yeah. Okay.
But there's
let me
no
go to
actual
google.com.
numerical answer. So in theory, she should have had to open one of these links to actually get information.
Yeah.
Because there's nothing on this landing page that tells me anything about how long it takes.
So if I do it on mine, on Safari, I actually still get the AI and it tells me an exact time. So it's heavily influenced by where you are, who you are, how you browse. Mine tells me in the AI overview, the time it takes to die from hypothermia, parentheses freezing, depends on factors like temperature, wind, clothing, and whether or not you're in water or air, but death can occur in under an hour, even faster in extremely cold conditions. So we don't know what OS. I have the newest OS. I have the previous generation iPhone. I don't have the 16. I think I have the 15. We don't know what they had. So there's so many things that could go into this, but I do think that there are plenty of apps that do actually, like you were talking about, log keystrokes. It depends.
Yeah.
I don't know if Safari is one of them. We know iPhone is incredibly guarded when it comes to privacy. Like that's a company where I think of when they have attempted to subpoena a company to like provide information, it's almost always Apple, right? Because someone has an iPhone and they need to get into it or something like that. But okay, anyway, Brittany and I have questions about this database, the query, the transaction, the timestamping, all of that, because it is not as cut and dry as it might seem at face value if you're not familiar with search engines and databases. Okay. So we move past that, right? She ends up calling people. She calls both women, right? Jennifer McCabe, and then I can't remember who the other woman was.
Carrie, right?
Maybe. Yeah, sure. I'm very bad with names.
I should have written these down.
Sure. If I wrote down all the names, the Jennifers, the Catherines, the whatevers, I still wouldn't remember. Yeah. So she calls both of them. She leaves the house at that point, right? And does she go to the Alberts at that? And that's when she hits, we find out later, John's car, which you do see the tire on his car move. Whether or not she did it on purpose to make it look like she did or not, she does hit his car for sure. So then she meets them at the Alberts house, right?
So she goes to Jennifer's house to pick her up because they wanted to go together.
Gotcha. Okay, so they drive together to the Alberts house.
Well, yeah, and then they go back to his house, and that's where Carrie meets them because they were convinced that he would be there asleep, but she had just missed him. And then together,
which is a weird thing to think.
Yeah,
to me,
yeah.
that was think, drunk thoughts.
Yeah, right. And then Carrie drives them all back to the Alberts house, and that's when Jennifer says she sees his body, and she sprints out of the car to find him.
Right, and they say that while they're in the car together, it sounded like the two of them were up front and she was behind, but she was like pushing up between the driver and passenger seat, right? And she's getting more and more erratic. Now, again, she's definitely still inebriated. She's only slept for a few hours. She definitely had a decent amount of alcohol. They all probably were at least somewhat inebriated. And she sees the body, they pull over, and then she begins to completely like lose her mind, which makes sense whether or not she did do what she's accused of having done. It makes sense that she would freak out in that moment to me, whether she forgot, whether she knew, but she was come like face to face with it, whether or not she had no idea and she wasn't a part of it at all. Yeah. But you can see in the dash cam that she is absolutely not okay. Yeah. And losing her mind.
Yeah. Because in her mind, she still has no idea if she did it. Right. She admitted to blacking out completely.
Totally.
Says she remembers absolutely nothing, but she remembers making all of those calls to him, which I find very fascinating. She remembers calling him, yelling at him, like all of those things. She remembers exactly what happened when she left.
Does she remember, or did they go? Oh, this is what happens though. Like,
Yeah.
when you're going over a trial and you're preparing, they have proof of her 53 or 54 calls. She would have been speaking about it repeatedly. So her recall of it might partially be based on having gone over the data and the proof of those calls to the point where she believes she remembers it, but she actually only recalls it because she's talked about it so many times. That's a little tricky to me because they didn't catch her like in the moment right after.
Yeah.
It's a retro of what she remembers at that point.
But what kills me,
yeah,
and she's very deliberate about, I know for a fact we drove. I didn't want to go in. She remembers how she was feeling. She was very anxious about it. She wanted him to go in. She remembers being upset.
Yeah.
But yet somehow magically after that, she remembers making a 3-point turn.
Yes.
And then going home and being upset because she can't find him. She remembers those main parts. But yet she can't remember if she hit him. Could I have hit him? Did I hit him? I don't know. I don't know what happened.
Yeah.
And to the point where she even asked her lawyer, if I don't remember, is it possible that I did this?
Yeah.
That's
but she seems like a very reactionary person. Like, as I think she's probably one of those people that's like so down to business when it comes to finance, so good at numbers, but in her personal life, I think she's entirely emotionally driven. I think that's part of what comes through, whether she realizes it or not and has the self-awareness in that documentary, is that she does not hide what she's feeling or thinking whatsoever. If she is happy about something, you see it. If she's mad about something or irritated, you see it. If she's highly volatile emotionally, it comes out.
That's true.
You know? So it's hard to know. But I did find it funny. Not funny, haha, but like interesting that they have all that dash cam footage, right? At no point did they show Jennifer McCabe searching on her phone and the three of them huddled like she said they were.
Yeah.
Let's be serious. They went over that footage second by second. Do they have that? I don't think it was presented in court.
Yeah.
Why don't they have that? Because she's standing, unless she was standing to the side and it wasn't in it.
Yeah.
In theory. I mean, the other thing that's interesting, right, is that you have 4 people who testify that she said 3 times, I hit him, I hit him, I hit him.
Yeah.
And there is literally no dash cam footage of that, which actually proves that she didn't say that in my mind. Because it was people that were first responders who were claiming that she did. And that dash cam would have caught it. So I actually believe that she didn't say it. That I do think is probably valid because it would have been on the footage.
Yeah, I can see that.
You know? But what a giant lie to tell, though, if it is.
Yeah, but that's just it. I think that there's just so many things have to be perfectly orchestrated from the literal very beginning of this case. And I don't know. You can look at it. I don't know. I had a very clear idea going into this of what I thought had happened. I knew whose side I was on, and I had gone down a rabbit hole. And there's an Instagram account that did a really great job, like every single day reporting on every update. So a lot of this wasn't new information to me, but it was also understanding that, to your point, like there's 2 sides there, 3 sides, right? Like there's hers and the truth, right? And when I think about the level of organization that would have to go into this and how many people would have to be involved and how expensive it would be, it's a lot of coordination. And I'm not saying they couldn't pull it off. Like, by all means, I'm sure there's a whole way to make all this happen. And there are some very sketchy people, like the cell phone being thrown away at a military
talk about
base,
that in a minute. Yep.
I think there are a lot of factors that make this look very bad.
Yeah.
But I'm also not going to lie. I went into this very much like she's innocent. I think she's being framed 100%. But when you take a step back and you kind of look at Occam's razor, what is the simplest explanation? I don't think he hit his head on frozen ground. I think when it's blizzard type weather and it's that cold, I don't think the ground is that hard. It seemed like it was very snowy still, and snow tends
It was
to be
January, so we would
soft.
have very hard ground at that. So our freeze can start, it depends on the year. We would have to actually go back and see whether or not we had a late winter or not. But our ground is absolutely rock solid unless we've had a weird thaw, which we typically don't. January, February are our harshest months of winter. So it would be. Yeah. There would, in theory, unless we had a mild winter, it would have been a very hard ground. Do I think you could get concussed simply from hitting your head on the ground? Possibly. Inebriated and hitting your head on the ground? I think that's that's possibly true. I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're less like sure now.
Yeah.
I will say, being up here, we have unfortunately had a lot of issues with corruption in our police force in Boston. There are so many movies about it that are about actual
Oh, yeah.
events. It's really unfortunate, right? And I think part of that is because we are the oldest Commonwealth. It's a very, very old service position to hold. There's just a lot there. Like our boys in blue absolutely get a lot of acknowledgement here. They have a lot of power here. And I'm going to be honest, like watching this, if I were Karen Reed, I would absolutely, if I was acquitted, move out of the state because I do
Oh,
not see a world.
100%.
Right. I don't think she's gonna. Like
No
I
way.
think she has brass balls, and I think if she gets acquitted, she will stay. I think if she, is convicted, she will absolutely fight it. But I don't think there's anything in her that's ever gonna leave this state. And to me, just knowing the way that people will treat you if it's a crime against a fellow officer,
Oh,
I
yeah.
don't see a world where she could live in peace. And again, she's got brass balls. I have to hand it to her there
Mhm.
because I wouldn't be able to do that.
Yeah.
Okay. So that whole situation happens. Four people lie. They do lie, right? About the I hit him because it's not on the dash cam and it would be, in theory. It should be. There's no reason why it wouldn't be. I can't imagine. Like no one came up with any reason why it wouldn't be. And even they couldn't come up with a reason why
Yeah.
like it wasn't on the footage, right? Then you have Jennifer McCabe who claims to have done the search at that point. There's no footage of that. And again, I feel like they would have scrubbed every single inch of that to find that.
Mhm.
That's crazy to me. But then it gets weirder and it gets more complicated. There's nothing cut and dry about this case, right? Because you have Trooper Michael Proctor.
Ugh.
Yeah.
This
So
guy.
first, yep, he's connected to the Alberts. There's video clips of him standing behind her SUV after they take it and they bring it in. He's standing behind it and it's actually a mirror of the video. Like the video is a mirror, right? So it's actually flipped. So what they tell you is he's actually standing behind the area where the taillight was broken for an extended period. Like you can see his hat there. What he was doing, we have no idea. Could be doing nothing, could be doing something, but it's suspicious. Like, did you feel
Yeah.
like that was a little like,
That
weird?
was weird. I think the fact that they didn't call out initially that the video was flipped, I think that's incredibly sketchy. They absolutely knew that.
Of
They were just
course.
hoping nobody caught on to it, which
Mhm.
doesn't work in their favor.
Absolutely.
That
It
guy's
pokes
sketchy.
holes. Oh, well, we know he is, right? Because then later on, he gets removed from the trial and fired by the Mass State Police because he makes sexual comments about Karen Reed in a text. He says, like, to his, what was it, friends and coworkers or superiors,
his superior.
right? His superiors, right? Saying things about making comments about her appearance, saying he had found no nudes so far, quote unquote. Again, he also made the comment to his sister saying he hoped she killed herself.
Mhm.
It's very inappropriate. He's dismissed for good reason. But to
Yeah.
me, because he was the one leading the investigation for all intents and purposes, right, from a state
Mhm.
police perspective, it taints so much of what happened. It's like, how do
Yeah.
you, I don't know,
Yep.
how do you then look at that and believe any of it was objective when he basically says from the beginning he knows she's guilty,
Mhm.
you know? Which is interesting. And then there's the hair on the back
Yeah.
of the car,
The
right? The
single hair.
singular hair. So my husband and I were talking about this. Like we live up
I was
here.
going to ask you about this. I'm like, is
Yeah.
it cold enough to freeze the state? Like, I was going to go to my car and try it, but it doesn't really snow here. So.
Is it? Okay. So here's my thing. How do you get one hair? I don't know.
I'm sorry. You clearly have not been to my house. I have singular hairs like they end up on my dogs. Like
right.
a single hair.
Me too.
Yeah.
But it's singular, multiple hairs everywhere. How does one of his, if their argument is that the car made impact with him, first of all, the hair was really down far, right? If their argument is that the car made impact with him, somehow a singular hair got plastered to it and then got covered with snow and froze and then thawed in the garage, could it in theory happen? So I don't know how the hair would have got there. That was my first thing. I'm like, how did it get there? Could it freeze to the car and drive around like that? In theory, in order for it to freeze to it, there would have had to have been some melting in order for that to happen.
Yeah.
So I don't, and then it would have to refreeze, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know how that would happen. The back of your car can get snow on it. She drove an SUV. She had a Lexus SUV, right?
Yeah.
Like a pretty decent sized
It was really
Lexus
nice.
SUV. Yeah, it
That
was
was a
very
full-size
nice.
SUV.
Oh, it was a full-size SUV. It was quite large. And it definitely had a little bit, like you can see when they pulled it in, it had a little bit of snow on the bumper. Do I think that it could be all the way up the back? I mean, totally possible. Typically, if your car sits outside, but hers was garaged.
Yeah.
Remember when she left? It caught like on the Ring camera. She pulled out of the garage. So wouldn't it have melted at that point? If the whole thing is like it melted in the second garage, why wouldn't it have melted in the first garage?
That's a good point, actually. I hadn't thought about it that way.
And the car wouldn't have been covered in as much snow because it was garage. So there would have been snow on it from theoretically going to the bar, from sitting outside of the Alberts. Mm-hmm. In theory, she then pulled it into a garage where it sat for a few hours and would have melted. And I can tell you, like as someone who lives in New England, that snow will turn into like a lake in your garage, right? If you go in with a ton of snow. Yeah. But then she drove again. I don't know. Could it happen? Sure. Weird things happen all the time. Does it seem likely? I feel like that was actually one of the most least likely things that they tried to kind of use as evidence. So I don't know. Could it happen? Maybe. But the two garage thing got me. I'm like, I don't know about that one. You know?
Yeah, that's fair.
It was weird.
That's fair.
Yeah. We should probably wrap this up. I'm thinking this
yet.
needs to be a 2-parter. So let's split this up into 2 parts. We'll have the second part on in either a week or a few days. We'll see how it plays out. I don't know. Maybe we'll do a bonus episode between episodes. Who knows? But don't forget to like and subscribe. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. And we release new episodes every Wednesday. So we will see you next week.
Bye. Have a good one.